Welcome so much. Thanks for joining us for World Kindness Day. I'm here with my colleagues Lois and Casey. They will be showing you a phenomenal lesson you can share with your students in regards to World Kindness Day. Now, if you haven't signed up, be sure to sign up for free. You will get access to activity packs, the lesson that we're sharing with you today, and you also get a chance to win one of five free Lumio licenses that are good for 1 year that you can share with a friend. Now, let's spread a little kindness and over to you, ladies.
Did you say 5 licenses and for your friends too? Lois, did you hear that?
I mean, that's
Yeah,
that sounds like free to me.
That's
indeed
pretty
it is.
amazing. I'm excited to spread some kindness today. How about you?
Love spreading the kindness every day. Not just today, every day.
Every day. Well, I'm so excited to be here with you today and to be talking about how we can consider spreading kindness in our classrooms with our students using Lumio. So Lois and I were having some conversations about teachers that we've been working with and different experiences that they've had over the last year working with students and getting them to understand how to talk to their peers in a way that's respectful, especially when they disagree about things. Lois, tell us a little bit more about what some of the things that you've heard from teachers.
Yeah, that's a good point, Casey. I think listening to teachers speak here at work, right? And then also my personal friends, I hear a lot about students being pretty apathetic, not wanting to get started, or not feeling like they have the tools they need to get started doing work, right? And it doesn't really matter what subject matter. It seems like teachers are having to explain. Directions over and over again, and there's a lot of discourse, and maybe our students don't necessarily have the tools they need to communicate effectively or in a kind manner, right? So kindness is super important, and I think getting kids to be able to communicate effectively can just create a kinder environment too.
Exactly. As we're talking, as we're moving on to the next step, I'd love for any of you that are interested to go ahead and go to hellosmart.com and join us as a guest. You don't need to sign in. So hellosmart.com, join as a guest and enter my class ID 11311 and your name, and that will bring you into today's session. You'll get to experience some of the things that Lois and I are going to be talking about today. You'll also notice that this information is scrolling at the bottom of the screen so that you can get connected really easily. Again, hellosmart.com, join as a guest. You'll enter class ID 11311 and your name, and in you will be. So I think what you were saying was so important, Lois, that we have to be very intentional about modeling and teaching students how to agree and how to disagree and have those conversations with their peers. I know as a mother that just my own personal kids, those are conversations we have to have on a regular basis because it's not just something that's inherent that they just are born knowing. So taking that time to really model for our students and for us to practice it, I think is great. And one of my favorite ways for students to practice a skill like this is through a game. Games really take the pressure off, and it takes it away from being a judgmental conversation and makes it more open for our students so they can think about it. So here we have a super sword. I'm going to go ahead and model the activity. You guys can hit start on your end. When I hit model activity, I'm going to be able to show you what the game looks like, but you can hit start and start playing right away. And what I have here are some examples and non-examples of ways that students and adults, right, should be talking to each other when they're having conversations that show their peers that they do respect where that person is coming from. And also this gives them some examples and some ideas of ways that they can incorporate these conversations into their own work and collaborative groups with their peers, which I think is really important. Like I said, games are a great way to engage students and get them to be thinking about things in a non-pressure situation. situation. And what's great about this game is if you put something in the wrong spot, it pushes it back out. If I get it in the right spot, it disappears. So I know asking my fellow, students or adults, saying, hey, what do you think about that? And then really listening to them. So I can really have this conversation. I could have students do this together and talk through what they're noticing about the different types of things that they're finding as examples and non-examples as well. Lois, anything you want to add there?
So I just love the immediacy of it, right? You don't have to push to see if it's correct or not. Like right away, I'm gonna know. Am I understanding this correctly? Am I doing it right? And I also just wanted to say hello to Miss Rainio from Finland. Thanks for joining us on YouTube. We appreciate that. But yeah, I love how simple and easy it is to set this up. And I mean, I can think of hundreds of different ways you could use this activity, right?
Yes, as I said, just even doing it with pairs and having students reflect back on how it feels if someone says, tell me more about why you think that versus whatever, or that's wrong. And just talking about how it makes you feel when someone cuts you off in that manner, and what a difference it is when someone wants to hear your perspective. And it's okay to hear and listen without changing your opinion. It's okay to just still listen to each other, which I think is great. You'll notice too, what I love is that we can add audio instructions here. Lois, you were telling me about a really an interesting way that a teacher is using this audio piece on their pages. Audio can be added to every page with directions, instructions. In this case, I'm talking more about this activity in general and what it means to having conversations. Would you like to share how that teacher was using the audio feature?
Sure, absolutely. So one of my friends knew she was going to be out for a little bit, and she created sub plans with Lumio lessons and actually created the audio giving instructions to the sub, and also kind of reviewing what students had done up to that point. So letting the sub know, like, they are ready for this. You may get some pushback saying they don't know how to do it, they don't know how, but they definitely do know. And this is what we worked on before, and they're ready to go. Make it happen.
I love that. I hadn't thought about using that audio feature for substitutes, but I love that idea. Something else that I think is really special about 3 of our games, Super Sort included, Super Sort, Match 'em Up, and Rank Order, all have what's called an activity dashboard. So right now I'm modeling the activity, but if I pop over to view progress, I can actually see that I have 3 students that are in progress. So they're in the middle of doing this activity. I see 5 have completed it. What's neat as well is I can also look at class results as a whole. So I can quickly see how we're doing as a whole class. And what's neat is this does not give away student names in this view. So I can open this, talk about the most frequently missed answers, nip any misconceptions in the bud right away. I can look at about how much time it's taking my students and what their average is, which I think is really interesting. But even more importantly, outside of seeing how the class is doing as a whole, when I'm not showing this to my whole class, when I'm looking at it more privately as a teacher, I can also click on student progress. You'll notice that you're always given a reminder, hey, you want to make sure this isn't viewable to all your students because we want to make sure that their answers and their grades are private. But when I'm looking at this individually by myself, I can show student progress and I can see how students have done, whether they're complete, whether they're incomplete, which is really nice as well. And I see we have some other friends from our ambassador community, which is exciting. I'm glad to have you guys here as well. So I love that I can see student data. I can also click and see how those students did on the page itself, on the activity itself, which is great. Great for conversations, great for meetings with those students. So you get the class overview that's available for all of your students to see because it's not tied to student names. But then as a teacher, you can look at individual data as well. So Lois really shared something that I thought was fascinating. One of her teacher groups was showed this really great way to have conversation, to have students have conversation about math problems. And I love this because a lot of times for me, when I was in the classroom, I wanted my students to really think about their strategy, think about the process and not so much focus on just the end result or just the answer. A lot of times when in math, when the focus is on the right or wrong answer, it can cause students to feel reluctant or maybe not as confident in their math skills. And I love that this opens up conversation and really embraces the process of problem solving rather than just focusing on the end result. So basically what it is this is an activity that we could put students into groups. So I could, right now, this is a view only. So you'll notice that you can't do anything to this page. But I could convert this into a group workspace and I could put students into small groups. Now, for this particular activity, I would want my students to be in groups in class together so that they can actually take their devices and sit together to have this conversation. But it allows us to put our students into groups. I'm going to open team 1 for now. And what team 1 could do if they were sitting in the class together is, let's say I was part of team 1, I could start by dragging, I'm going to be the pink marker. So I'm going to say, I want to start by saying what my strategy is. So I'm going to say, today my strategy was that I looked for the important information. I crossed out the information that was extra, that wasn't needed. And then I tried to think about what type of skills I needed for this problem. And so then my other group partners could pull their marker out and share their perspective. So they could say, well, I disagree with how you approach this, Casey, because one of the things you didn't think about was X. And so it could allow us to have that conversation. And once all your markers are taken, so you'll notice that the green markers are up. Now the person that has the green markers can't speak anymore. So they need to wait till the rest of us use our markers. And once we do, then we can reset the activity and start again. So I love that this allows for that open-ended, deeper conversation. Lois, did you have anything to add since you're the one that found this awesome activity?
I mean, I just think it's great. And I like how you mentioned how each person has 3 markers, right? And so once I use all of my 3, I don't get to speak anymore. And so I think that helps our students kind of pause and wait and listen to others' perspectives as well, which we know really helps to foster those connections that matter, right?
Exactly. And if you're not a math teacher, no worries. We also have a variation, one that you could use if you were doing a Socratic seminar, a fishbowl discussion, a debate of some sort, but still giving those specific starters to help students know how to speak with kind language while still getting their point across and helping students understand that they can disagree. That's part of living, right? We're not supposed to agree with everyone on all the things. We want to be able to disagree, but we want to do it in a way that fosters kindness and fosters respect amongst each other. So we do have a version if you are not someone who teaches math.
Yeah, I love how you created this tool, Casey, with academic language stems, because really it's super helpful for any subject and grade level, right? I know with my own children, they had homeschool for quite some time during COVID, and skills that they typically would have learned in the different grade levels they were in kind of got passed over because they were working a lot on their own, right? And being back in that learning environment where working with others is so important, or at least trying to understand somebody else's point of view, this is a great way to get our students talking in a kind way that helps them grasp the concept.
I think that's such a good point. I think we're seeing that with many of our students, that some of those skills that they would have learned along the way sort of fell by the wayside a little bit when they were more isolated and not part of that classroom community. So I think, now more than ever, it's really important for us to be intentional in the classroom of ways that we can help build this academic language and language that they can use both in the classroom and outside the classroom. Even in our household, I think it's important for the kids to learn how to disagree with us as parents and with their siblings as well, in a similar way. So I love that this can help inside of the school and outside of the school.
I mean, can't they just agree though, Casey? Like, can't
I
they?
know. Just do what I say, right? Is that the way? So
Yeah.
speaking of that reflection piece, to me, one of the biggest things is for students to have time to reflect on how they're doing with these skills. So I love to add a reflection piece to almost any lesson that I do. And I love that this one is really focused on how they're speaking in their groups. I think that's an important part of that group work, and something I know we all in our jobs collaborate quite a bit. And we also have disagreements or we have different perspectives. And so being able to get our ideas and our thoughts across in a way that we're being heard, but where we're not cutting someone else off from sharing is important. So I love for students have to reflect, but I love having them reflect personally so they can think about, where do I land on this scale? Did I, and we have different days, right? There may be one day not my best, and the next day in groups, I'm very thoughtful about my language. And so it's okay for them to recognize too that this scale may change depending on the particular activity. But I also love that they can rate their group, how they think their group did as overall, and have a conversation. I loved as a teacher walking from group to group after they reflected as a individually about how their group did, and really talking about what their successes were, what their challenges were, and what they'd like to see happening next time they worked in groups.
Yeah, and with the activity that you created, I think you could even create just a snippet of that to be like, let's talk about what individuals thought of how your group did. Or maybe I thought that I was a great contributor to my group, but my group did not feel that way. And instead of having bad feelings or anything like that, we can use those stems to be like, well, I disagree because of XYZ. Let's support that with some evidence, right? But in a kind
Exactly.
way.
Exactly, because then it takes the emotion out of it, and it really makes it more about, not about the person. I know my dad was always one to say, remember, when you're arguing with someone, it's not about the person, it's about the problem, it's about the issue at hand. It's both of you working towards that issue, not working against each other, which has always stuck with me. And I think that's a good thing for our students to remember when they're having those conversations as well.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's really interesting, Casey. I was reading an article about a longitudinal study about what defines a successful teacher, right? And lots of different people have different ideas on exactly what that is, right? But I think we can all
Mhm.
agree that many districts and administrators would say test scores would determine how successful a teacher is, right? Um, I don't know. As a teacher, I kind of felt like if my students came to me and just talked about random things, like I felt like I was successful because I built a bond with that student and they trusted me, right?
Right.
Um, but I think everyone's an individual and they determine that differently. What I found interesting was this was a 10-year longitudinal study, and it kind of determined that there are lots of things that make successful teachers, but the most successful teachers in this study did really well on test scores and also student satisfaction. I mean, you can take student self reports as seriously or not as you want. We all know self reporting is a little whatever. But these teachers scored very highly on both. And what they did is they used number one, manipulatives. And number two, they did group work or small group work. And I think that's really helpful because it allows students to see others' perspectives, right?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you shared that study. That's really interesting. And what's great is that Lumio offers both of those things, right? We have manipulatives, digital manipulatives that are available. And I think that's a really good thing because it allows for equity. I know that I had students that didn't have access to things like coins or blocks or whatnot when they were at home doing homework. And so this was a way, Lumio is a way that can help level that playing field. Plus, that homeschool connection, I think, is really important. And then being able to put students into small groups or even a whole class working together, and then practicing some of these skills that we're talking about today. I love that Lumio helps with those two things that were kind of key in test scores and student satisfaction. Because, like you said, I think teaching and student and learning is so much more than test scores. But I love that they were looking at a longer, like a bigger, broader picture of it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how things change in the next 10 years, right?
Oh, definitely. I think that we're going to see lots of different things, especially in ways that we've had to change how we teach and work with students over time. So just like we're going to be giving away some licenses and giving those of you that win a license a chance to give that another license to a friend. I also thought it'd be good. We had one of our colleagues, Asha, who started us off today, had a great idea of this bingo board. And so we put it into Lumio. So Lumio has a Lumio library that is filled with all sorts of content. So that tic-tac-toe board you saw, this bingo board, we have those in the Lumio library that you can customize and use with any of your students in any kind of way. So that tic-tac-toe board could be used as a traditional tic-tac-toe board or choice board or something along those lines, or the way we used it today to develop conversation starters for students. This is a bingo board that we created. This one's all about doing random acts of kindness. This would be great to do with your students anytime throughout the year. It doesn't have to just be around World Kindness Day. And what's neat is all of these, all the text in these boxes is editable. So if you, for example, don't have students that go to recess, maybe you're a secondary teacher and you guys don't have recess, you can adjust any of these to make it make more sense for your grade level, your content area, or your students, or your environment. But I love that this is a way for students to think about being kind to others and track that. You'll notice one of the other things that we can do is we can infinitely clone any of our objects, which means that you have an unlimited number of Lumio fireflies that we can use to cover up this bingo board. So our students could try and do 5 random acts of kindness, but maybe they're going to do a blackout and fill the whole bingo board, which would be awesome as well. I wanted to show you really quickly where that bingo board lives and where some other great content lives in your Lumio library. So I'm going to quickly end this lesson for a moment. And you will see that I'm now on the main home screen of Lumio. When I'm here in the very top right now, I'm looking at my library. So I think about this as like my bookshelf or my filing cabinet has all of my stuff. But sometimes I like to go borrow things from my friends, get influenced by some of my teacher friends, or maybe I want to go to a store and find something really neat. Lumio Library has a whole host of free content available for us, created by teachers for you guys. So there will be all sorts of things. You'll notice that we have featured content, which will be really timely in nature. So you'll see some Thanksgiving and thankfulness activities here. You can always click see more. You'll see that we have some collections around emotional literacy and ways to manage your classroom and things like that. But what I love too is we have a variety of manipulatives. So that tic-tac-toe board, for example, this is where I got it. You'll notice that mine looks slightly different, and that's because I was able to customize it. So I took that X away and added 3 additional circles instead. And then, of course, filled in the tic-tac-toe board also. So there's all sorts of content here, and it's very easy for you to grab and go and use. So if I go back up to that bingo board or that tic-tac-toe board, if I click on it, what's great is I can certainly test it out. So I can actually try it in real time. And then if I love it, I can save it to my library. And now that will place it here in my space. And I can customize and mix and match different activities from the Lumio library within my lesson, which is really powerful.
Casey, another thing that you just made me realize is we talked about equity and access, right? The great thing about Lumio is you can share the content with other teachers who may be working on the same content, but you can also use the share link to send any of the content home, right? So if we're teaching students how to ask questions or how to respond in a kind manner, we can actually send that home to parents and they can actually use that same type of language at home and understand what their child is doing in the classroom and how they're learning to speak with conflict, right?
That is such a good point. And how nice would it be if our teacher sent home a random act of kindness, a bingo board that they could do at home, right? And random acts of kindness to do in the household, not just at school, or just giving parents insight into the conversations that you're having. I think is good, and giving them those question stems. I think we all know that math looks and feels a little bit differently than maybe when we went to school. So that would be really helpful for parents to have when they're trying to help their students with those challenging math activities that maybe they haven't done in a year or many.
I mean, I might need a whole teacher to come home with me to help my kids with their math work, honestly.
Exactly. I know. So I just think there's so many great ways to use Lumio. Definitely wrapped around kindness. One of the things to think about being kind is it's not just about doing random acts of kindness like we see on this awesome bingo board, but it is in ways that we're teaching students to use academic language when they're having conversations about problem solving and Socratic dialogues and all sorts of things. So incorporating that's really key to really changing up what's happening in the classroom and the overall feel of the classroom as well. So are we going to be giving away the licenses? How will people know they win?
So, all I ask is that everyone go to go.smarttech.com/livestream. Sign up there. You will get access to this phenomenal lesson that the ladies have shared. I think it's a great lesson. I love the templates, and I love that you showed the Lumio library where you can find all of these resources. It makes it super easy for teachers. But you also get a chance to win one of 5 Lumio licenses for free. So we'll have 5 lucky winners, and you get a license for yourself as well as for a friend. So it's all about spreading the kindness and sharing. Awesome. Well, ladies, you did a phenomenal job. I love the lesson. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And don't forget to spread a little kindness. We'll see you soon.